The willow tree wept over him like it knew sorrow firsthand. Blood soaked the earth beneath Cole Merritt's shoulder as twilight crept over Dustmere. His breath came ragged, every exhale a memory he wasn't ready to surrender. The shot had come from behind, a coward's bullet. He'd barely made it out of town before collapsing under the rustling branches. And just as his vision blurred into dusk and regret, soft hands pressed against his wound, and a voice, steady, trembling, spoke into the coming dark. "You're gonna live, stranger, but you better be worth saving." Evelyn Hart wasn't supposed to be there. Sheriff's daughter, Sunday school teacher, keeper of her father's moral compass. Yet here she was, sleeves rolled, eyes wide with fear and fire. She had followed the blood trail from town after hearing shots near the creek, and now she pressed a kerchief against the wound of a man whose face was on a bounty poster tacked to her father's office wall. Cole tried to speak but coughed instead, pain shooting through his ribs. Evelyn shushed him. "Don't move. I don't know who you are. Don't want to. Not yet. But I can't let a man bleed to death alone." The sun dipped low, bathing the field in gold. Evelyn tied her scarf tight and fetched water from the creek, her dress catching on thorns as she moved. Cole watched her silhouette sway like a ghost in the grass, and for the first time in years, he felt something warmer than anger in his chest. He didn't deserve this kindness, not after everything, but she gave it anyway. From the distance, the town bell tolled. One slow clang. Sundown curfew. Evelyn bit her lip, knowing she had minutes before someone noticed she was missing. Her father especially, the law, the man who'd raised her to see the world in black and white. "You'll be safe here," she whispered, eyes full of guilt and something else. Curiosity, perhaps. Just until dawn. Then she vanished into the night, leaving Cole alone beneath the willow, bleeding but alive, clutching a scrap of fabric that smelled like lilacs and recklessness. Some men bled for gold, others bled for revenge. Cole Merritt didn't know it yet, but he was bleeding for love. The quiet stranger. 3 weeks earlier, the wind carried dust and secrets into Dustmere. A lone rider crossed the ridge at sundown, silhouetted against a flame-colored sky. His hat was low, coat dust-stained, eyes hidden, but the Colt Navy on his hip gleamed like it remembered every man it had buried. Cole Merritt wasn't his real name, not anymore. Not since the hanging in El Paso. He'd burned that name, same as he'd buried his brother under a cottonwood tree with no marker. Now he was just another drifter chasing rumors and riding ghosts, hoping Dustmere held the truth and maybe a reckoning. The town watched newcomers like hawks. Dustmere wasn't lawless, but it wasn't far from it either. Between cattle wars, railroad land, grabs and silver strikes upriver, strangers were rarely friends. The saloon doors didn't creak, they groaned like they didn't want to open for him. Inside, the piano player faltered and a few heads turned. He asked for a room at the inn, paid in silver, said little, drank less. It was Evelyn Hart who first noticed something beneath the silence. She was delivering hymn sheets to the church when she passed him on the boardwalk. He tipped his hat, polite, not pushy, but something in his eyes, green, stormy, unreadable, made her heart quicken, like she'd seen him before, like she was supposed to know him. "Heard he's some kind of gun hand from Arizona," whispered Elsie at the Mercantile. "A hired killer." Evelyn dismissed it, but she watched him from a distance, in the way he helped a limping boy gather dropped apples without saying a word, in how he sat alone on the chapel steps at dusk, staring at the sky like it had wronged him. He didn't belong, but he wasn't dangerous, not yet. Sheriff Alden Hart noticed too, a former Union scout with eyes like flint and a temper dulled by loss. He didn't trust silence. "Drifters carry trouble in their saddlebags," he muttered to his deputy. "Mark my words, that one's hiding a war behind his smile." But Evelyn felt the air shift when Cole passed. as if the world inhaled something it wasn't ready to breathe. She didn't know his name, didn't know he'd come to Dustmere chasing the ghost of a dead brother. But something inside her whispered, "This man will change everything." A town on edge, Dustmere wasn't built on peace. It was carved out of tension and held together by uneasy compromise. Ranchers grazed where they pleased. Rail barons bribed councilmen behind closed doors. And in the middle stood Sheriff Alden Hart, trying to keep his town from exploding with only a worn badge and a weathered Bible. The town's streets were too quiet that week. Cattlemen grumbled about land surveys. A Union Pacific scout had been spotted mapping the north edge of town, where homesteaders like the Lin family, Chinese immigrants trying to farm an unforgiving plot, were already under pressure to sell. Tempers flared like prairie fires. One spark and Dustmere would burn. Cole kept his head down. He took odd jobs, shoeing horses, fixing broken wagon wheels, helping old man Sullivan repair a fence without asking for pay. The people didn't know what to make of him. He didn't drink, didn't play cards, didn't brag, but the sheriff watched. Always. It was on market day that fate spun its first thread. Evelyn was struggling to load a crate into the church's wagon when Cole stepped from the shadows and lifted it like it weighed nothing. She turned, startled. "You always sneak up quiet?" she asked, brushing a lock of auburn hair behind her ear. He offered the faintest smile. "Habit." They stood there, crate between them, sunlight catching the dust in the air like tiny fireflies. She noticed the scar near his temple, the way his hands trembled slightly when he let go of the wood. "You a veteran?" she asked. He didn't answer, just looked away. Sheriff Hart saw it from across the street, saw the way Evelyn tilted her head, the way the stranger didn't flinch at her questions. That night, he rode out to the Lynn homestead alone, but returned with no word of why. He didn't sleep, just sat on the porch, polishing his rifle. By week's end, the rail agents posted a flyer offering to buy the Lynn land. Cattlemen threatened to burn it. Someone shot their barn mule. Cole saw the tension boiling and knew the pattern. This was how violence started, but his focus drifted elsewhere. To Evelyn, to her laughter drifting from the chapel window, to the softness in her voice that felt more dangerous than any outlaw he'd ever faced. Because for the first time in years, he wasn't sure if he came to Dustmere for revenge or for something far riskier. Hope. The willow by the river had always been Evelyn's hiding place. As a girl, she'd read poetry there, with her feet dipped in the cool stream, far from Dustmere's dust and watchful eyes. Now, years later, it became a place of secret meetings and blooming silence. Cole found her there one afternoon, humming an old waltz to the breeze, boots off, skirt trailing in the grass. He hadn't planned to speak, just ride past, maybe nod and keep riding, but she looked up and smiled, and that undid him faster than a six-shooter at close range. "You following me?" she teased, not unkindly. He dismounted slowly, careful not to startle her. "No, just wanderin'." She patted the grass beside her. "Then wander this way." They sat beneath the arching limbs, sunlight dancing through the leaves like stained glass. For a long while, no words passed between them, just the chirp of crickets and the hush of water over stones. Evelyn pulled out a worn book of Whitman and began to read. Her voice was soft but steady, unafraid. Cole listened like it was scripture. "That poem always made me feel like I belonged to the land," she said, "even if the land never wanted me." He looked at her, then down at his hands. "I never belonged anywhere." She closed the book. "Maybe we make our own places." A hawk soared overhead. A train whistle groaned in the distance, and the distance between them disappeared. He taught her to shoot that afternoon, laughing for the first time in years as she missed every bottle. She called him a poor teacher. He called her a worse student. When their laughter faded, a quiet took hold. Cole reached for her hand without thinking. Her fingers didn't pull away. "Your father'd kill me for this," he murmured. She met his gaze. He'd have to catch you first. They kissed beneath the willow tree, not rushed, not reckless, just two people out of time, clinging to something too fragile for Dustmere. Later that night, Cole returned to town and spotted the newest flyer posted outside the sheriff's office. Wanted, Cole Merritt, dead or alive. $3,000 reward, pinned by the sheriff's own hand. The town knew, and so did her father. The clang of the saloon's doors hadn't yet stilled when Sheriff Hart stepped into the street. Dustmere's sky boiled with late summer heat, and townsfolk peeked from behind shutters as the lawman stood motionless, hand resting on his holster. Across from him, Cole emerged from the general store, saddlebag in hand, frozen mid-step. Cole Merritt, Hart's voice rang across the dust like a church bell at midnight. You come here under lies, my town, my daughter. Cole's jaw tightened. He didn't reach for his gun. I didn't hurt her, he said, calm and low. But you will, Hart spat. Men like you always do. Within moments, the street filled. Evelyn appeared at the corner, breathless, her eyes darting from her father to Cole. Please, she whispered, but no one heard her above the tension. Then came the first shot, but it wasn't from either of them. From the alley near the post office, muzzle flash lit the shadows. Deputy Mason cried out and dropped, blood blooming through his vest. The shooter ducked back, one of the rail goons Evelyn had warned her father about. It had all been a distraction. Chaos ignited, screams rang out. A second shot grazed the sheriff's arm as he spun around, firing into the alley. Cole dove for Mason, dragging him behind a barrel, bullets whizzing past. Stay with me, kid, Cole muttered, pressing his hand to the wound. Mason, barely conscious, blinked up at him. You're not what I thought. Evelyn rushed to her father, helping him reload as he bled through his sleeve. Smoke blurred the street. The rail agents vanished as fast as they came, leaving shattered glass, wounded pride, and silence in their wake. Sheriff Hart limped toward Cole, gun still drawn. You saved him, he said, voice strained. Why? Cole stood slowly, blood on his hands. Because it was the right thing. And maybe I ain't always done the right things, but I know when it counts. The sheriff lowered his weapon, but his eyes were stormy. Get out, Merritt, before I change my mind. Evelyn stepped forward, lips parting, but Cole was already walking. The crowd parted like water. He didn't look back, but Evelyn's voice echoed behind him. Where will you go? His answer was a whisper swallowed by the wind. Anywhere but here. And then he was gone. For now, secrets and sins. Evelyn found him 3 nights later, bleeding again, this time from a stitched wound that had torn open on the trail. She'd followed tracks beyond the ridge, ignoring her father's warnings, the sermons, and the ache in her chest that had grown louder since Cole's departure. He lay in her family's old hunting cabin by the creek, half conscious and muttering a name in his fever. Micah, he said. They strung him up for what he didn't do. She pressed a damp cloth to his brow, heart racing. Who's Micah? Cole opened his eyes slowly. The pain etched across his face wasn't just physical. It was memory clawing its way up from somewhere too dark to bury. He sat up, hand trembling, and told her everything. My brother, he whispered. We rode to Dustmere 5 years ago. Micah was better than me. Honest. He caught a man cheating at cards. Big rancher's son. That boy cried foul, and your uncle, Sheriff Josiah Hart, didn't ask questions. Called a mob. By nightfall, Micah was swinging from a rope. Evelyn went cold. My uncle? Cole nodded. I came here to bury the name Merritt alongside his badge. The wind rattled the shutters. Evelyn stepped back, blood drained from her face. Josiah Hart had been a hero in Dustmere, but she remembered whispers the night he drank too much and came home red-eyed. She remembered her father burying a revolver in the backyard after Josiah's funeral, and the way they never spoke of Micah Merritt. I didn't know, she murmured. God help me. I didn't know. Cole looked at her, soft but distant. I never wanted to bring you into this, but I can't leave until his name's cleared. Not if it means living with that silence. She walked to the window, arms crossed tight, eyes scanning the horizon like the truth might ride in and fix everything. What if you told my father? Cole scoffed, voice bitter. And he'd believe his dead brother was a murderer? Silence settled again, dense, broken only by the creak beyond the glass. Then Evelyn turned. Her voice was quiet, but steel lay underneath. Then we'll make him believe it. Outside, the moon was rising, and the sins of the past were waking. The war comes home. Dustmere never slept easy, but that morning it didn't wake at all. It snapped. The railroad agent struck just before dawn, lighting the Lynn family's barn ablaze while cattlemen rode in from the west, hollering about trespasses and stolen grazing rights. Gunshots cracked before the sun touched the chapel steeple. Evelyn was at her father's side when the first bullet hit. Sheriff Hart staggered outside the jailhouse, clutching his side, blood already soaking through his vest. Cole had warned them it was coming. No one listened. Now they had no choice but to hear it. Cole galloped into town from the creek cabin, rifle strapped to his back, eyes dark with resolve. The streets were smoke and screaming. A rail agent dragged a boy from the mercantile steps. Cole shot him clean through the shoulder before the man could blink. "Get to cover," he yelled as townsfolk scrambled behind wagons and doors. He found Evelyn knelt beside her father, helping him reload his Colt with trembling hands. "He's losing too much blood," she said, voice cracked but steady. Cole dropped beside them, yanking off his bandana to press against the wound. "We need to get him off the street." "I can't leave the town," Hart rasped, jaw tight with pain. "You already have," Cole said. "Let her take the badge now." Hart looked at his daughter. She wore no gun, just courage in her eyes and dirt on her dress. He unpinned the badge and handed it to her. "Protect them," he said, and she did. Evelyn climbed the saloon balcony and called out above the chaos, voice like a bell through smoke. "This ends now. Lay down your arms or face the people of Dustmere." A pause. Then came the next tragedy. Elsie, from the mercantile, Evelyn's childhood friend, stumbled from the shadows, clutching her stomach, crimson pouring between her fingers. She collapsed in Evelyn's arms, eyes wide, lips parting to speak, but no sound came. Gone, just like that. Evelyn's hands shook as she pressed them to the girl's wound, uselessly. She looked up, face streaked with ash and grief. Cole placed a hand on her shoulder. No words, just fury in his veins. They wouldn't run anymore. They would finish this, together, whatever the cost. Love at gunpoint by dusk, Dustmere lay in ruin, windows shattered, wagons smoldering, blood drying in the dirt. The townsfolk had fought back, led by Evelyn's voice and Cole's aim, but the cost had carved lines into every face. Sheriff Hart was unconscious in the clinic. Children cried without tears, and Evelyn, once the soft voice of reason, now walked the street like a storm wrapped in calico. Cole stood at the edge of town, preparing to ride. He'd cleared his brother's name with Hart before the sheriff passed out, showed him the signed confession stolen from Josiah's belongings. It didn't erase the past, but it proved Micah hadn't deserved the rope. Hart had nodded through the pain and said one word, "Go." And now the bounty hunters had arrived. 3 men, dust-caked and dead-eyed, flanked by an informant from El Paso. They rode into the square without a word, threw down the flyer and pointed their rifles at Cole. "You're coming with us," the lead hunter growled. "Dead or alive don't matter much to me." Cole raised his hands, slowly. "Don't do this in front of these people. You should have thought of that before you made yourself a hero." The crowd froze. Nobody moved. Then Evelyn stepped forward, shotgun in hand. her face carved from grief and defiance. She stood between Cole and the bounty hunters, the same way she had once stood between her father and the world. "He's not going anywhere," she said. "Not while I'm breathing." The lead hunter laughed. "Step aside, girl. You ain't got the spine." She cocked the shotgun. "Try me!" Silence crackled through the square. Then a shuffle. Mrs. Lynn appeared, holding a rifle. Then Old Man Sullivan. Then the blacksmith, the school teacher, and even the barkeep. One by one, they lined up behind Evelyn. "He bled for this town," she shouted. "You want to take him? You'll have to go through all of us." The bounty hunters looked around and saw what Dustmere had become. A broken place, yes, but one reborn by fire, bound together by the man they'd come to kill. They backed away, cursing under their breath, disappearing into the wind. Cole turned to Evelyn, breath shallow, eyes raw. "You'd risk everything for me?" She stepped closer, placed the badge back in his palm. "No," she whispered, "for us," and kissed him in the ashes. The morning after the standoff, Dustmere felt like a ghost town holding its breath. Smoke still lingered in the alleyways, and broken glass glittered in the gutters like fallen stars. Cole stood at the edge of town beside his horse, hat low, saddle worn, the sun barely climbing over the horizon. Evelyn waited by the livery stable, clutching the locket her mother once gave her, a silver heart etched with a wildflower. She hadn't said a word since sunrise. Neither had he. "I have to finish it," Cole finally said, tightening the cinch. "El Paso judge needs the papers. If I testify in person, Micah's name won't just be cleared, it'll be remembered, right?" Evelyn nodded, forcing a small smile. "You always had one foot out the door, didn't you?" "Only 'cause I never thought someone would be waiting." He stepped toward her, close enough to feel the warmth of her breath. "I'll be back," he said. "I'll wait," she whispered. He kissed her, soft, lingering, as if memory could be folded into touch. Then she slipped the locket into his palm. "For luck," she said, "and so you don't forget where you belong." He rode out before the town woke proper. The trail stretched long and uncertain, but his heart carried something it hadn't in years: purpose. Weeks passed. A letter came, then another, and then silence. Whispers grew like weeds in Dustmere. A bounty gone wrong. A shootout near Santa Rosa. Some said Cole was dead. Others swore they saw him in New Mexico under a different name. The locket Evelyn had given him remained unopened in her palm each night, as she prayed without words. Autumn came, and with it, quiet. Evelyn resumed her work in the church, tended to her father's limp, and answered every stranger's knock with a flicker of hope she couldn't kill. And then, on Christmas Eve, just as snow began to fall, someone knocked once more. She opened the door, breath catching before she even saw his face. Tattered coat, torn gloves, a limp in his step. Cole stood there, eyes darker, beard fuller, but smiled just the same. He pulled the locket from his coat pocket, held it up like a promise he never broke. "Told you I'd come back," he said. She laughed, soft and sharp and wet with tears, and pulled him inside before the cold could steal another moment. The return to Dustmere. The snow didn't stop that night. It fell in soft silence, blanketing the scarred streets of Dustmere, hiding the burn marks, the broken windows, the reminders of what had been fought for. Inside the sheriff's home, the hearth crackled warmly, casting golden light across Evelyn's face as she watched Cole sit beside her father once more. No longer outlaw and lawman, but two tired men with different kinds of wounds. Sheriff Hart coughed lightly, sipping warm tea, his eyes squinting at the man he'd once sworn to run out of town. "You're lucky I ain't got the strength to arrest you," he grumbled. Cole smirked. "Guess I picked the right time to show up." The sheriff's expression softened just enough. "You kept your word. Not many men do." Evelyn smiled behind her cup, watching the quiet understanding settle between them like dust after a storm. The past hadn't disappeared, but it no longer stood between them. Later, the town gathered at the chapel for midnight hymns, and Cole stood in the back, hat in hand, listening as Evelyn's voice rose in song. Clear, sure, filled with the kind of grace only pain could teach. Children laughed in the pews. The Lynn family brought hot dumplings for all. Even gruff old man Sullivan patted Cole's back like he'd always belonged. Afterward, Cole and Evelyn walked through the snow-covered square. Moonlight glowed on rooftops. The locket she'd given him now rested around his neck, catching the light as he pulled her close. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked. She looked up at him. "Only when I thought you were gone." He took her hand, fingers intertwining easily, like they'd been waiting their whole lives to fit. "I found your brother's name etched on the judge's record," he said. "They added a note. Wrongfully executed. Case closed." Evelyn leaned her head against his shoulder. "Then it's time to stop running, Cole Merritt." He nodded, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Then I reckon this town's stuck with me." In the distance, a train whistle blew, not as a warning, but as promise. And as snow continued to fall, soft and forgiving, the man who once came to Dustmere seeking vengeance found something far harder to win: a place to rest, a woman to love, and a future worth staying for. Would you have waited for him? Let us know in the comments below.